right, well, we shouldn't keep you waiting. If you're here, we might as well start the show. Welcome to Flamesnation Live. It's Pike and Steinberg along with you. I'm here at our Sportsnet 960 downtown studios. Pike is at Shea Pike, and it's been a season, Pike. It's been a season. Here we are again talking about a Calgary Flames loss to the Ottawa Senators, and that's two straight gut punch losses to the Ottawa Senators. Before we get too much further into it, say hello to Zach, Noah, Shane, Mike, Sam, Chris, Josh, and JF, all with us already on this Thursday night. But Pike, what an absolute mess of a season it has been to this point.
Well, I mean, it's certainly not the way they drew it up. I was, we were talking some, you and I have friends all around the league, talking to folks, and I think invariably the folks I've been talking to have been, wow, like no one really expected this. I think we, in the market, I think we kind of thought, Flames are, might not win the division, but they'd be in the mix, maybe second, third, fourth place. Like, I don't think we'd be looking at the calendar and going 72 days in the season, they'd be in the mix for sixth place. I think before Vancouver played Winnipeg last night, and it didn't go well for Vancouver, but it was a Vancouver loss that actually kept Calgary above them in the standings by points percentage, and the Canucks have more points. So, in a word, I think I put out a tweet about this during the third period of yesterday afternoon's game. If the Flames come out of Ottawa with 0 of a possible 4 points, it'd be a disaster, and it's a disaster.
Yep. It really is. Like, it is absolutely a disaster. They could not afford to come out of Ottawa with 0 points, and that's exactly what they did. And I keep on using this. Like, we want to talk about our sponsor, Deuce Vodka, being the celebratory vodka. Instead, it's the Drown Your Sorrows vodka for Flames fans. That's the way it's been this year. But if you're looking to drown the sorrows, get yourself to your local liquor store. Check out Deuce Vodka. If your local liquor store does not have any in stock, yell at them, get them to bring it in. It is available all across Alberta. Thank you to our friends at Deuce Vodka for being with us on Flames Nation Live. Once again, it's Pat Steinberg and Ryan Pike along with you. It now begs the question, what next? Like, what do you do now if you're the Calgary Flames? You're in a spot where the playoffs are a long shot. It's not impossible, but they're going to need to play at a certain level. You keep using the term aggressively 500, and it's a great term. If that's what they've been through 34 games, and now they need to be aggressively 700 or 750 to make the playoffs in their final 22, yeah, it's just, from a likelihood standpoint, it's not high. In saying that, it's not impossible, but it sure does make you wonder what the best course of action is for this team over the next 18 days between now and the April 12th trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I think, we're talking about the celebratory vodka. I think if you want to look at some bright spots organizationally, there's been some really nice individual performances by some of the team's prospects. And so in that regard, if you're the Flames, maybe this is the type of situation where you want to maybe give your scouts some extra bullets. Maybe you look at, moving out some potential UFAs. Derek Ryan's a pending UFA. I don't think that they'll be able to bring back David Riddick at the same cap that he's making. He might be looking for a home elsewhere. So those are two guys. I mean, the Flames have used Louis Domingue and Artem Zagadulin as backup here and there this season. Zagadulin's played, and honestly, Zagadulin has been perfectly adequate in the American Hockey League. He hasn't been Dustin Wolf good, but he's been, if you're thinking, well, you're going to be riding Markstrom anyway, and if you're trading Riddick, it's basically the white flag because you think you'll need two goalies to be competitive. If you trade Riddick, you don't really care about being overly competitive. You're just trying to build for guys. So in that case, see what Zagadulin is, because regardless of if the Flames are a playoff team this year or not, they're probably going to need to figure out the backup goaltending situation. So, if you're Brad Treliving, if you're this management group, what's the problem? Can you start? The problem you're trying to solve is, can they be a playoff team right now? Well, the short answer is, unless you go on an absolute tear, maybe not. But if the idea is that you hire Daryl Sutter for a 3-year contract, not just to try to make the most out of this season, but the 2 subsequent seasons, what do you need to do as a manager and as a hockey ops group to make that a possibility?
So let's start with the idea of being a buyer. I don't think that makes any sense. The Ricard Raquel, Victor Arvidsson, Sam Reinhart, Taylor Hall, any of the names that could be out there between now and the deadline on April 12th. I don't think it makes any sense for the Flames to give up the draft capital, the prospect capital that they would have to give up to bring one of those guys in, because they're going with or without another forward. It's unlikely that they're going to get to the playoffs. And I think if you're going to get there, then you might as well do it with this group. You might as well see what they can do and evaluate. Going out and adding to this group, I don't think they've earned it. So I don't think this makes any sense to be giving up first round picks and B or A prospects to bring guys in. That seems like a move that Winnipeg or Toronto does. That seems like a move that Vegas does or Colorado does. Teams that are ready to compete, not the Flames. So I don't think buying makes any sense. Any pushback on that?
I'd say no buying, except if you can find a hockey move that works. Like, say, okay, I mean, you probably don't want to go out and buy core pieces necessarily, but let's say, with the cap space you do have, if you can find a taker for, say, Sam Bennett, and you can add like Victor Arvidsson, like if you can make strategic moves like that without giving up too much futures, I think maybe. But those are the only things I really consider.
I think this is the time, and I wrote about this earlier on Flames Nation this week. I think this is the time for them to make smart strategic moves, but not the big franchise altering moves, buying or selling. Like if you're going to be moving on from any one of your core, Monahan, Gaudreau, Giordano, Kachuk, any one of those guys, and I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm just saying any one of those guys, the deadline is not the time to do it, because I don't think that you give yourself enough options, or as many options as you could have, to maximize a trade for one of those guys. And buying, a hockey move at the deadline, especially the COVID deadline, the first one we've ever had, it seems so unlikely too. I mean, if it happens, if there's something that knocks your socks off, I guess have at it. But for the most part, it feels like that's not going to be there and not going to be available for the team. So I think the smart strategic moves are the ones you talked about. The moves like David Riddick or Derek Ryan or Sam Bennett. I think you can move any one of those three guys before the deadline. You're not going to get a king's ransom for any one of those players, but you will get something. And to your point, give your scouts a little bit more ammunition going into the draft in July. That's what I think this team should be doing. I love Derek Ryan. I don't know if he's here next year. So if you can get Frank Saravelli of the Nation Network and TSN today said link Derek Ryan to the Edmonton Oilers, for instance. So there's a potential option. I think Sam Bennett. I think you'd have teams that would be interested in unlocking the cheat code of playoff Sam Bennett. And you mentioned all the reasons for why David Riddick might be interesting to another team. So those are the types of moves that I think this team should be making, not franchise altering moves, and certainly not big time buying addition moves at the deadline.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, we're hearing reports that for those of you who aren't intimately familiar with the NHL's COVID protocols, and if you aren't, good work avoiding it, because we have to read through it to know what's going on. But basically, the way things work is, like, say, if the Flames were bringing in another player from a Canadian team, the rule is 7-day quarantine. They have tests on day 1, 3, 5, and 7, and if all 4 of those tests are negative on day 8, you can start practicing with your team. But that's only
that's within Canada.
that's
That's
in
if you
Canada.
go from
So,
province to
for
province.
example, the AHL is using the exact same protocols the Flames are. So Tyler Parsons, as our friend Mike Gould reported the other day, but Tyler Parsons is going through his quarantine right now, returning to the Stockton Heat in Calgary from his off-season home in Michigan. So because he's fully healed up, he can cross the border and rejoin the team. But because the protocol is 14 days, so poor Tyler Parsons is hanging out in an apartment or a hotel somewhere with like a recumbent bike and nothing else. So that's right now that's the reality for the border. There's reports right now that the Canadian government will allow an amendment because, to be quite honest, the 7 days between provinces thing has worked really well for the NHL and Canada, and they think it's a logical enough thing to use for the border crossings for the trade deadline. So, but it's still, instead of going, what happens usually is Flames make a trade on deadline day. They get the guy, depending where he is, the same day or the next day. It's not going to be like that. You're going to be waiting a week. And that's the best case scenario, is a week. So, between that and between there's going to be a flat salary cap for at least one more season. So you can't really take on salary. So you're not getting immediate help. You're not going to get value because of the salary constraints. Oh, and there's the expansion draft. So this is not a trade deadline designed for maximum craziness. I mean, I'm sure on our friends at Sportsnet 960 The Fan and across the Sportsnet networks on Monday the 12th of April will be you'll be diving deep in on what stories you get, because there's probably not going to be a lot of stuff happening. We might be talking about trades that happen over the next 2 weeks because teams are going to want to have that lead time to build things up. So it's not going to be a time for that, and the restrictions are going to be gradually lessened and loosened over time, and maybe by the nice thing is if you're making big moves, the off season is the way to go, because quarantine don't matter because you don't have games to play, and teams are allowed to go 10% over the salary cap over the summer. So the summer is the time historically when Brad Treliving does his work anyway, and B, there's fewer constraints that allow you to get creative. So in the interim, I mean, this is probably more or less the team we're going to see. They might, like I said, there's probably a possibility they can swap out a handful of bodies. Once Nordstrom and Brett Ritchie are both medically cleared, which sounds like it's getting close for both guys based on what Daryl Sutter said today, they're going to have the ability to potentially move both those guys in or out of the lineup, or if they want to try out some new faces, maybe to the taxi squad to move some guys into the lineup. So, in the interim between now and the deadline, I think the Flames are going to try to do the best they can. And, what I think might be interesting is, if the Flames feel like they've been written off, what happens then? Because, one of the more entertaining teams you and I have covered, the 14-15 Flames, I vividly remember that training camp because, everyone showed up in September for training camp, and to be quite honest, no one thought they'd be very good. They had just finished fourth and last. They had just drafted Sam Bennett. They had just, had a very uneven season under Bob Hartley. And everyone thought, Flames, not really. They're basically the same team as the year before. They're not going to be that much better. Probably bottom 5, bottom 6. And every player we talked to that training camp was a little bit offended, had a chip on their shoulder that people thought so little of them. And I see that kind of energy right now with the Ottawa Senators, where they seem perfectly content to make sports writers and fans of other teams look stupid. And you know what? Maybe the Flames come down the stretch going, if everyone thinks we're out of it, screw it. We're just going to play with house money. And they'll play loose. We thought maybe they'd get looser after the coaching change because the proverbial other shoe would drop. But, who knows what happens now?
Let's read a few of our comments on the live chat. First of all, from Pat, says, why was Kyle Dubas at the Sens Flames game? Any chance that there could be a good landing spot somewhere in Toronto? The reason why Dubas was there is because the Maple Leafs are playing the Senators right now. I think there was a little bit more made of that than needed to be. Maple Leafs are in Ottawa. Dubas was there. That's the one place he can go. He can go to the rink or he can go to his hotel. If you can get out of your hotel, you're going to go to the rink. I'll tell you this much. The road is hell this year. It is not the regular road. Those long trips for teams are no fun right now. both Chris and Jefferson. Chris says nobody on Stockton to bring up for forwards, and then Jefferson says, I like the idea of bringing kids up for the rest of the season and looking to move guys like 93, 13, and 23 in the offseason. Mike Gold, where are you? I wrote about this today at The Nation. One of the things that I'm interested in, especially once we get past the trade deadline, if they do move on from a player or two and don't bring anybody back in return, Pike, what about Matthew Phillips? What about Adam Ruzicka? What about Luke Philp or Connor Mackey? Names like that. What about bringing up some players, Glenn Godden again, guys that have been playing well in the American League?
I'd be for it. And I think to me, the interesting thing about all this is, let's be honest. Who are the potential impact prospects? I mean, Dustin Wolf is 3 shutouts away from setting the Western Hockey League shutout record, but he's a goalie, and he'll probably need a year in Stockton to sort of get acclimated to the rigors of the pro game. And I don't think anyone really expects him to come in and supplant Jacob Markstrom right away. But outside of him, like Mackey was, for a guy who is learning the pro game and playing his first pro games ever, the first 5-6 games he played with the Flames, he's pretty good. I mean, he got points. He didn't get embarrassed. He didn't look out of place. The worst thing you could say about him is he was fine. And the games he wasn't fine, he was pretty good. So I think there's something in Mackey, and he's a guy who's under team control for a while. You probably want to see what you have, and I'm a big proponent. Like, we've seen a lot of Connor Zary in the American League, and for a 19-year-old, he was one of the better players in that league, regardless of age. So I think he's earned himself a look at camp. Jacob Pelche, silver medalist, another guy who was a captain of his junior team. Pelche, despite missing 2 months of the Quebec League season because of all the stuff surrounding the World Juniors, he's like top 15 in basically every defensive category in that league. He's pretty good. So he'll be a guy who gets looks. But if you're a first-round pick, if you're a medalist at the World Juniors, you're gonna get a long look at camp your first for a full pro year because they want to see how you slot. If you're one of these other guys, though, you might use this opportunity to sort of put in a bid for your spot in the line, because if you're the Flames and you're going, we don't know what's happening with, hypothetically, a Gaudreau or a Monahan or a Bennett. So there's jobs available. And sure, it might make sense if, 1 or 2 of those jobs go to the aforementioned guys, the Zaries and the Pelches. But, if Derek Ryan goes elsewhere, why, would you want to put in a 27, 28-year-old guy in Byron Frais, who's pretty good but isn't going to get a lot better? Or maybe Godin. Adam Ruzicka hasn't played any NHL games yet, but he's big and he can play with a lot of skill. The Flames don't have a lot of guys that overlap in that Venn diagram. So for me, I just want to see them. I think it's going to be interesting to see how creative they get, because I think a lot of the things they've been doing is sort of been trying some of the same things over and over and over again, roster wise. And if they do throw in the towel by trading a few guys at the deadline, okay, then let's see them get creative. Because I think if they get creative and embrace the flexibility they have, then they can start the training camp in September no more than they know. Because who cares about preseason games? You don't learn anything about preseason games. No one's happier than me that we had no preseason this year, because you didn't watch 2 weeks of NHL veterans trying not to get hurt. But now, okay, you have the ability to try guys, in live bullets. Like, Johnny Gaudreau, I think, had to step up his first year in the NHL, his first full year, because he got a game in. And he got his feet wet at the very end of his last college season. So can they give other guys that kind of opportunity to sort of have some momentum as they go into the next season? Because the next season, it's potentially, depending on what happens, last season of his current contract for Mangiapane, last one under his current contract for Tkachuk, for Gaudreau, for Giordano. So it's going to be an important season. And depending on what happens, either you're moving on to some guys or you're doubling down on some guys, and you need to figure out which guys you can work with.
And then just one more. Jordan's put this into the chat a couple of times. He just said 2 words with a question mark: Rangers letter. And he's referring to when the New York Rangers a couple of seasons came out and said, hey, bear with us, we're going to go in a different direction. It's a long-term. Basically, it was a rebuild letter. I don't get the feeling that that's going to be coming anytime soon with the Calgary Flames.
I don't think you go to the trouble of luring Daryl Sutter out of his comfortable retirement on his ranch to have him guide a rebuilding team. I don't think he's wired like that, and I don't think you
Me
don't
neither.
spend the money that you're spending on a Daryl Sutter. You're not spending to the cap. You're not, for all the hand wringing about, how the Flames are doing things. You can make an argument about how the Flames can't really, for lack of better terms, their financial commitment, because they're taking what we've heard. I think Sportsnet's Eric Francis surmised in a column a couple weeks ago that the Flames might be losing somewhere between $50 and $60 million this year. And they're spending to have their farm team here so they can play games, so they can be available. They're spending to, do all kinds of different things. They're not half-assing this. They're definitely trying. Could they be trying different things? Oh yeah, definitely. But I think they definitely aren't spending this money to be a mediocre team. They want to be good, and if they were going to throw in the towel, they would just shed salary and just sort of, there's easier ways to make a buck than running an NHL team.
For sure. For sure. Once again, thank you to our friends at Deuce Vodka for bringing us Flames Nation live. We couldn't be here without the fine folks at Deuce Vodka. So check them out at your local liquor store. If they are not carrying Deuce Vodka, yell at them. Yell at them and say we need Deuce Vodka. It's available across Alberta, and it brings you Flames Nation live twice a week right here from the good friends at Flames Nation. He's Ryan Pike on the bottom of your screen. My name is Pat Steinberg from Sportsnet 960 at the top. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Flames and Jets go Friday at 8 o'clock. We'll have it for you starting at 7 o'clock on your home of the Calgary Flames, Sportsnet 960, The Fan. Bye, Pike.
Bye.
Stay safe. Be kind to one another. We'll talk to you next week on Flames Nation Live. Thanks, everybody.